Can you show some moves? What about the lip? Do the lip thing. Come close on it.
Bruno Mars has finally opened up about his childhood trauma. We all know Bruno Mars, the superstar. But no one knew the real Bruno. The boy who played 1,000 shows before turning 10. The teenager who crashed in abandoned zoos. The man who gambled it all away.
1, 2, 3, 4! You stepped inside with a vibe I ain't never seen.
Now, at 39, he's finally ready to tell his full story. Not about the debts, not about Jessica leaving, but about the childhood wounds that fueled his rise, the addiction that nearly ended it all, and the dark family secret buried for decades. And what he reveals, it changes everything.
I don't live my life with regrets, and I don't dwell on anything. I feel like it happened. It must have happened for a reason. I hope that I'm not here today because of what happened then. I hope I'm here today because of my achievement and because of my music.
The making of a performer. Long before he became a global icon, Bruno Mars was just a toddler in Honolulu, Hawaii. While other kids his age were still learning to hold a crayon, he was already holding a microphone. His family ran a popular musical act in Waikiki, and little Bruno became their secret weapon. Dressed in tiny, glittering jumpsuits, he would channel Elvis Presley with such precision that audiences couldn't believe their eyes. He didn't just imitate the king of rock and roll, he embodied him. The hip swivels, the mic stand poses, the smoldering looks, all of it came naturally to a child who seemed to have been born with performance in his blood. They called him Little Elvis, and the name stuck. By the time he was 5, he'd already performed in front of 40,000 screaming fans at the Aloha Bowl halftime show. At 6, he appeared on national television on the Arsenio Hall show, holding his own alongside seasoned entertainers. At 7, he landed a small part in the movie Honeymoon in Vegas, and walked away with $600 for a single day's work, money that felt like a fortune to a kid from Hawaii. Before his 10th birthday, he'd logged nearly 1,000 performances. That kind of childhood doesn't just teach you how to entertain. It rewires your brain. It makes you comfortable in chaos. It gives you an identity so early that you don't know who you are without a stage beneath your feet. The adrenaline becomes normal. The applause becomes a drug. Years later, when he was preparing for the Super Bowl halftime show, one of the most high-pressure performances in the world, he'd call it recess. For him, that pressure was pure comfort. It was where he belonged. But the spotlight didn't stay warm forever. When Bruno turned 12, his parents divorced, and the family act dissolved overnight. The music stopped. The money dried up. Suddenly, there was no stage and no safety net. Bruno, his father, and his brother found themselves homeless. They slept wherever they could, in a beat-up yellow Cadillac, on the rooftops of Waikiki, and once in an abandoned bird sanctuary where peacocks screeched through the night. They had no bathroom, so they'd sneak into hotel pools just to shower. Dinner was whatever they could grab from 7-Eleven, usually Spam musubi. For 5 months, they lived without electricity. Bruno practiced guitar by moonlight because they couldn't afford amplifiers. At school, kids mocked his thrift store clothes, but he kept his head down and his focus sharp. He started earning $75 a night impersonating Michael Jackson, using the money to record demo tapes and pay for bus fare to auditions. That grinding poverty didn't break him. It forged him. It taught him that if he wanted a different life, he'd have to build it with his own hands. There was no safety net, no backup plan, no wealthy relative to bail him out. It was sink or swim, and Bruno chose to swim. The long road to Los Angeles.
Was this what you thought coming to LA was going to be?
No, especially because I got signed pretty quickly. I got signed when I moved up to LA. Within a year, I got signed.
In 2003, Bruno caught the attention of music executives who saw him as the next Latin pop sensation. They wanted him to sing in Spanish, even though he didn't write in Spanish and had no desire to be packaged that way. The industry had a formula, and they wanted to fit him into it. But Bruno had seen what happened to artists who let labels define them, and he wasn't interested. He rejected their vision. Instead, he chose his own identity. He took Bruno from a childhood hero, wrestler Bruno Sammartino, a man known for his strength and resilience, and added Mars because a girl once told him he was so confident he must be from another planet. The name was a statement of intent. He wasn't going to be anyone's puppet. When he landed in Los Angeles in June 2003, he was 18 years old, carrying only $600, 3 demo CDs, and a luggage tag with his new name on it. The city didn't welcome him with open arms. In his first year, he bounced between 4 different living situations, from a $40 a night motel on Sunset Boulevard to a cramped Koreatown apartment shared with 6 other struggling artists. To pay bills, he lied his way into a DJ gig on Van Nuys Boulevard, even though he'd never touched turntables before. He was fired after 2 nights, but the $75 he earned kept his phone from being shut off. That summer, some weeks he survived solely on 99-cent tacos from Jack in the Box. It was a humbling existence, but Bruno never lost sight of his goal. In February 2004, Motown Records offered him a deal. The contract was only 3 pages long. Bruno joked he'd seen thicker breakfast menus. The label didn't know what to do with him. They still wanted a Latin pop star, and Bruno was determined to make music that defied easy categorization. 9 months later, they dropped him without releasing a single song. The humiliation was crushing. He'd already called his family back home to tell them he'd made it. Now he had to tell them he'd failed. But that failure turned out to be a gift. Another artist dropped by Motown at the same time was Philip Lawrence. The two hit it off immediately, bonding over their shared frustration and ambition. They made a pact. They would create music so undeniable that no record label could ignore it. By 2006, Bruno and Philip were broke but unstoppable. They wrote songs in the back of Philip's beat-up Toyota Corolla, parked outside a small Hollywood studio run by a guy named Ari Levine. Ari had the equipment. Bruno and Philip had the ideas. They'd pay him in burritos from 7-Eleven. Whenever a chord progression or drum pattern clicked, they'd yell, "That's a Smee," which became the name of their production team, the Smeezingtons. They worked 10-hour days, 6 days a week, dissecting hit songs to understand what made them work. They studied every detail, the chord changes, the arrangements, the production techniques, the lyrical structures. They analyzed over 1,000 tracks before they ever released one of their own. The grind was relentless, but they were learning from the masters and developing a sound that was uniquely theirs. Then Bruno's sister, Haley, stepped in. She was working in fashion in West Hollywood and slipped one of his demo CDs to a guy named Mike Lynn, who worked for Dr. Dre. At first, Mike almost tossed the CD because the vocals sounded strange, almost like a chipmunk. But 43 seconds in, Bruno hit a note that made Mike stop and rewind. He flew Bruno out to Record One Studios for a meeting. No deal came from it, but the fact that someone at that level had noticed gave Bruno the validation he desperately needed. In L.A., being seen by the right person can change everything. To stay afloat, they sold a song they'd written for themselves called Lost to Menudo for $20,000. It was just enough to keep them from being evicted. But their real breakthrough came when they wrote the chorus for Flo Rida's Right Round. The track shot to #1, selling 636,000 downloads in its first week, a digital record at the time. Then they wrote B.O.B.'s Nothing on You, and lightning struck twice. By the time Bruno released Just the Way You Are in 2010, the songs he'd helped create had already sold over 15 million downloads for other artists. He hadn't even released his own album yet, and he was already a hitmaker. The Smeezingtons had become one of the most sought-after production teams in the industry, but Bruno was just getting started. The breakthrough and the backlash. Bruno Mars didn't appear out of nowhere. His solo career started quietly with an EP called It's Better If You Don't Understand, which dropped in May 2010 to almost no fanfare. It was barely 13 minutes long, contained only 4 tracks, and by the end of the year, it had sold just 27,000 copies in America. It looked like a flop, but hidden in that short collection were the seeds of something far bigger. The songs were raw, personal, and hinted at a depth that the pop world wasn't expecting. 5 months later, he released Doo-Wops and Hooligans in October 2010, and the world changed overnight. Recorded on a shoestring budget of $70,000 with no borrowed samples, the album went on to sell 7 times platinum in the U.S. and surpassed 15 million copies globally by 2020. In the UK alone, it remained on the official albums chart for an astonishing 400 consecutive weeks, nearly 8 years, longer than Abbey Road or even Thriller. The album wasn't just a commercial success, it was a critical darling too, praised for its genre-blending sound and heartfelt lyrics. His debut single, Just the Way You Are, entered the Billboard Hot 100 on August 7, 2010, and hit number 1 just 8 weeks later. It spent 48 weeks on the chart and earned 13 times platinum certification. In the U.S. alone, it sold 6.7 million digital copies, placing it among the top 25 best-selling digital tracks in history. The song was a universal declaration of self-acceptance, and its message resonated across generations. Then came Grenade. During its peak week, it pulled in 559,000 downloads, the 8th biggest weekly total ever recorded at that time. It didn't just top the U.S. charts, it dominated in 15 countries. Between January and March 2011, it hit number 1 on Billboard 3 separate times, a feat achieved by only 5 other songs in history. By March 2011, Bruno had 2 songs each certified over 5 million in U.S. sales. The only other artist to achieve that before him was Lady Gaga. The Grammys took notice, awarding him 7 nominations in his rookie year, including Album and Record of the Year. No male solo debut had earned that many since Lauryn Hill. He didn't win the top prizes, but he walked away with Best Male Pop Vocal Performance for Just the Way You Are. At 25, he became the youngest man to win that category since Stevie Wonder in 1974. Billboard named him their Top Hot 100 Artist of the Year. The IFPI declared him the best-selling global artist of 2011, surpassing even Adele's late-year surge. But he was far from finished. In October 2012, Locked Out of Heaven entered the charts at number 34, slow by his standards, but within 11 weeks it had climbed to number 1 and stayed there for 6 consecutive weeks. That run made Bruno the first solo male artist since Bobby Vinton in 1964 to score 4 Hot 100 number 1s within his first 2 years of charting. Even Michael Jackson couldn't claim that. The track sold 1 million U.S. downloads in just 10 weeks and eventually went 10 times platinum. Spotify streams later surpassed 1.8 billion. Critics were stunned. Rolling Stone called it the Police revival nobody ordered but everyone needed. That reggae rock fusion broke the monotony of EDM that had dominated pop radio. And in less than 4 minutes, Bruno shifted the entire sound of the airwaves. Unorthodox jukebox was never meant to be a genre-bending experiment. The label wanted a safe, radio-friendly dance album. But Bruno and his team secretly expanded the vision, stretching the budget to explore 9 different styles, from the disco shimmer of Treasure to the raw rock of Gorilla to the reggae-infused Show Me. The label panicked, with one memo warning that radio stations would never play such a chaotic album. Bruno didn't back down. He even forfeited 4% of his future royalties to pay for live horns and vintage recording equipment. The gamble paid off. Within a year, the album sold 6 million copies worldwide. Critics praised its audacity. Spin magazine described it as flipping through a jukebox at 3 a.m. Chaotic, but magnetic. Bruno's genre-hopping formula would later be adopted by artists like Dua Lipa and Harry Styles, both of whom cited him as a major influence. At the 2014 Grammys, Unorthodox Jukebox won Best Pop Vocal Album and 2 other trophies. Engineers later revealed that each track used more than 120 individual audio layers, the most of any nominee that year, even surpassing Daft Punk's intricate productions. That same night, during his Gorilla performance, a 0.6-second shot of Bruno thumping his chest prompted a viewer complaint to the FCC. No fine was issued, but it earned him a spot in the 2015 Guinness World Records for the shortest televised act to trigger an obscenity review. After the Grammys, sales surged. Unorthodox Jukebox shot up 171% on the Billboard 200, one of the biggest Grammy Week boosts since Alanis Morissette in the 90s. The global phenomenon. Then came Uptown Funk. It started as a casual jam session on May 1, 2014, in a temporary studio. The first version was recorded as a voice memo that producer Mark Ronson still keeps bookmarked in his inbox. The final track required 11 writers, became entangled in 5 lawsuits, and finally dropped on November 10, 2014. It went straight to number 1 and held the top spot for 14 weeks, from January 17th to April 18th, 2015, the longest run of the decade until Old Town Road broke the record. The song sold 300,000 downloads per week at its peak and racked up 15 million daily streams worldwide. In the UK, it crossed 1 million sales in just 10 weeks, becoming the fastest-selling jazz-influenced single since James Brown's I Feel Good in 1965. Its cultural impact was staggering. Delta Airlines reported a 37% increase in first-class drink orders after adopting it as their boarding anthem, dubbing it the Uptown Drunk effect. The BBC even used its tempo to teach CPR in a 2015 broadcast, demonstrating just how deeply the song had penetrated the culture. But his next album almost never happened. When Bruno submitted 24K Magic in 2016, his label was unimpressed. It contained only 9 tracks and ran for 33 minutes, shorter than some EPs. Bruno stood firm. He wanted it to feel like a 1990s party mixtape, something you could play from start to finish without skipping a single song. When the 2018 Grammys arrived on January 28th, 24K Magic swept the major categories, winning Album, Record, and Song of the Year. Only the second R&B album of the century to achieve that trifecta. He took home 6 trophies in one night. Streams of That's What I Like jumped 130% overnight, and the track later went 7 times platinum. By April 2018, the album had moved 5 million copies globally, despite never hitting number 1 on the Billboard 200. The supporting tour was equally monumental. The 24K Magic World Tour kicked off on March 28, 2017, in Antwerp, and wrapped up on December 30, 2018, in Honolulu, spanning 215 shows across 6 continents. In New Zealand, he broke Beyoncé's record by selling 48,483 tickets in Auckland, 4,100 more than her 2016 concert. When the tour concluded, it had sold 3.5 million tickets and grossed $367.7 million, placing it among the top 10 highest-grossing tours in history, beating out U2's Joshua Tree Tour and Lady Gaga's Monster Ball. Every night, Bruno delivered a show that was part concert, part Broadway production, with choreography, visuals, and storytelling that left audiences speechless. Every track on 24K Magic was crafted with obsessive precision. The Talkbox intro mirrored Zapp's Computer Love from 1987. The smooth synths on Versace on the Floor evoked Babyface's classic sound. The remix of Finesse with Cardi B was mixed using a 25-year-old console to achieve that early 90s vibe. Even the 9-track count had significance. Bruno's favorite cassette, Bobby Brown's Don't Be Cruel, had 9 songs per side. Critics hailed the album as pop's most valuable history lesson, crediting it with bringing funk back to the mainstream at a time when EDM had taken over. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was a masterclass in production and songcraft. In September 2018, Bruno recorded the hook for Gucci Mane's Wake Up in the Sky in under 30 minutes. Released on September 14th, it peaked at number 11, but demonstrated remarkable longevity. By July 2025, it had gone 6 times platinum and accumulated 1.4 billion Spotify streams, more than many #1 hits from that year. It was a reminder that Bruno's talent wasn't limited to his own albums. He could elevate any track he touched. Silk Sonic and the supergroup that couldn't miss. Late one night in Las Vegas, inside the packed Dolby Live Theater, Bruno Mars stepped into the spotlight wearing a gold tuxedo at exactly 11:47 p.m. The crowd fell silent. Then he spoke 4 words: "Silk Sonic is real." Seconds later, a smooth vintage ballad filled the room. The song was called Leave the Door Open, and at the stroke of midnight, it was released to the world. It didn't just make an impact, it dominated. It debuted at number 4 on Billboard, climbed to number 1 within a month, and stayed there for 8 weeks. By mid-2022, it had been streamed over 2.3 billion times on Spotify. Silk Sonic wasn't just a project, they were a phenomenon. A year later, they took the Grammy stage in white tuxedos with 18 string players behind them, while Bootsy Collins sat regally on a velvet throne. When the performance ended, the audience rose to their feet. That night, Leave the Door Open won Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best R&B Performance. Their album, An Evening with Silk Sonic, was recorded old school, 1 room, all analog, no digital tricks, and it sounded like 1973 at its finest. In its first week, it sold over 104,000 vinyl copies, the biggest vinyl debut for an R&B act in over 3 decades. The attention to detail was staggering. Bruno recorded 16 different versions of just the snare drum for 1 track. Anderson .Paak's final drum solo on 777 happened in a single take at 3:07 a.m. after hours of tequila-fueled jamming. By the end of 2022, the Silk Sonic Tour had grossed nearly $145 million from only 37 shows, an average of almost $4 million per night. Some fans paid as much as $6,500 for a single ticket. Not bad for a band chasing a retro sound in a digital world. The project proved that there was still an appetite for classic soul and funk, and Bruno was the perfect artist to deliver it. The collaborations that broke records. On August 16, 2024, Bruno sent out a cryptic message, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Bring tissues. Minutes later, Lady Gaga dropped Die With a Smile. It shattered streaming records with 27.4 million plays in a single day, surpassing Adele's Easy on Me. The music video, shot on 16mm black and white film, felt like a cinematic masterpiece. 2 voices, 1 chandelier, and Morse code flashes that fans decoded as One Last Dance. The song ruled the charts for 18 straight weeks and went multi-platinum in 32 countries. During its biggest week, it earned nearly $1 million a day in publishing revenue. Every second of the track was worth over $11. At the 2025 Grammys, Bruno and Gaga performed it with a gospel choir, and when Bruno held a note for over 11 seconds, he was called a human saxophone. That moment trended #1 on Twitter. The final vocal was recorded in a single take at 4:12 a.m. after Bruno smashed a tequila bottle against the studio wall. You can actually hear the glass breaking at 3:18. He left it in because it made the song feel real. It was a testament to his commitment to authenticity, even at the expense of perfection. Then came a collaboration with Blackpink's Rosé. She teased a 9-second guitar riff on TikTok that garnered 42 million views in 12 hours. When the full track dropped, it entered the Billboard Hot 100 at #3, the highest debut for a K-pop female duet in history. The neon-drenched music video reached 100 million YouTube views in just 19 hours. 9 months later, at SoFi Stadium, Rosé was mid-performance when the lights went out and Bruno walked on stage. The crowd's roar registered louder than a jet engine on sound meters. As they performed APT together, 1.2 tons of confetti rained down. Spotify reported a 300% streaming spike that same night, bringing the song back to the top of the charts nearly a year after its release. When fans finally learned what APT meant, after Party Tango, Bruno explained it came from a night in Buenos Aires in 2019 when he and Rosé danced until sunrise. He claimed there's a video of it, but it's locked in his phone, and only Rihanna knows the passcode. By August 2025, the song had been streamed over 3 billion times, and the duet added $48 million in merchandise sales to Blackpink's world tour. The woman behind the curtain. In spring 2011, long before the Grammys and arenas, Bruno met Jessica Caban in a hotel restaurant in New York. She'd just finished a modeling audition. He'd just performed. They locked eyes for 40 minutes without either of them moving. Finally, he walked over. They talked until 2 a.m., even after the chairs were stacked and the lights were off. Within a year, she had left everything behind to move across the country to be with him. She started on an air mattress while he toured the world. But slowly, they built a life together, a home in Studio City, a dog named Geronimo. Bruno rarely spoke about her publicly, calling her my rock only once in an interview before moving on. When he released When I Was Your Man, he refused to explain it, saying it felt like bleeding on tape. Fans assumed it was about a rough patch with Jessica. She attended only 3 red carpets in 13 years. Their relationship was private, protected from the glare of the media. Then, in late 2024, something shifted. Her anniversary posts disappeared. Bruno flew to Tokyo alone, wearing the gold necklace she'd given him, but turned backward to hide her initials. On a beach photo in January 2025, a fan asked if they'd split. Her response, "I will always celebrate and be happy for all of his continued achievements. Cheering from afar," was just 15 words, but it sent the internet into a frenzy. They'd spent Christmas apart, him in Vegas, her in San Juan. Sources claimed they were living separate lives. Others said he tried to fix things but extended his Vegas residency instead. Yet They never officially confirmed a split. She still follows him on Instagram. He still likes her posts. They still co-own the house. Some say she stays in the guest room when she's in town. Others claim she was spotted backstage at one of his shows in May, but no photos ever surfaced. The uncertainty only deepened the speculation, leaving fans to wonder whether the couple had truly parted ways or were simply navigating a difficult chapter. The $50 million gambling rumor. The storm broke on March 15, 2024. NewsNation aired a segment with unnamed sources claiming Bruno Mars owed around $50 million to MGM Resorts, accumulated through gambling debts he was working off via his Park MGM residency. Within hours, the internet erupted. Gossip blogs amplified the number. Reddit threads spun wild theories that MGM essentially owned him. Talk shows piled on, with Shannon Sharpe claiming Bruno once lost $17 million in a single night at blackjack. The narrative was irresistible, a pop star singing about riches secretly drowning in debt. In 2 days, #BrunoBroke went viral, and Bruno Mars' $50 million debt appeared in over 4 million Google results, all from a single anonymous claim. It was a perfect storm of misinformation, fueled by our collective hunger for scandal. MGM Resorts responded immediately, not with vague PR, but with a firm statement to Forbes and Billboard. No debt. Our relationship is based on mutual respect. They even emphasized that Bruno was one of the world's best performers. Their denial protected more than Bruno's image. It reassured investors. If the public believed their headliner was financially trapped, MGM's stock could suffer. Within 3 days, Variety had repeated the statement, and MGM's stock price remained stable. Wall Street believed them. But the rumor had already done its damage, and many fans continued to believe the narrative despite the official denial. Bruno didn't issue a formal denial. He made it a joke. During his April 12th show at Park MGM, he looked out at the crowd and said, "Deadpan. Ever since they said I'm on the hook for $50 million, my phone's been dry. Where my friends at when I'm up?" The crowd exploded. The clip was watched over 6.8 million times on TikTok within a day. In January 2025, Spotify announced he'd hit 150 million monthly listeners. Bruno reposted it with the caption, "Keep streaming, I'll be out of debt in no time." When he surprised Rosé's audience at SoFi Stadium 2 weeks later, his opening line was almost out of debt. That Instagram post pulled in 32 million views in 72 hours. Every joke diffused the rumor and turned it into free publicity. It was a masterclass in crisis management, proving that Bruno's charisma extended beyond the stage. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Bruno Mars's incredible journey, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Drop a comment below and let me know. What surprised you most about his story? Was it the childhood struggles, the gambling rumors, or the Silk Sonic collab? Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive. We're always exploring the untold stories behind the biggest names in music, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Until next time, stay curious and keep the music playing. See you in the next one.